the shimmering intellectual capital of the ancient world, Alexandria of Egypt, that great confluence of Greek reason and human longing, there lived and moved a philosopher whose name the celestial record has preserved not among conquerors or kings, but among those rarer souls who discovered what it means to truly live. His name was Rodan, and what the Urantia revelation preserves of him is nothing short of a portrait of a human being in the very act of becoming. Rodan did not find the gospel of the kingdom through the apostles themselves. He received it through a young man, one of the 70 who had gone out bearing the living word, who had heard Jesus teach and carried those teachings back to Alexandria. What this unnamed evangelist deposited in the philosophic soul of Rodan was not a creed, it was not a ritual, it was the seed of a transformed way of living. And Rodan, schooled as he was in the finest Greek intellectual traditions, his mind already disciplined to seek the highest, received that seed upon extraordinarily prepared ground.
When Rodan traveled to Magadan, to the encampment near Pella where Jesus and his apostles had gathered, he came not as a supplicant, but as a peer. He came to compare, to test, to refine. And the two apostles who spent days in magnificent dialogue with him were none other than Nathaniel, the honest doubter with the searching mind, and Thomas, the empiricist who would not believe without evidence. What unfolded in those days of discussion was one of the most remarkable intellectual exchanges recorded in the entire Urantia revelation. Here was a Greek philosopher who had received Jesus' gospel secondhand, yet had already philosophized it forward, had taken the raw ore of the kingdom teachings and smelted them into a coherent philosophy of personal living. He brought to the apostles not questions alone, but answers. And the apostles, in their turn, brought him the living testimony of one who had walked with the Son of Man in the flesh.
What Rodan laid before Nathaniel and Thomas was a crystalline vision of what he called the good life, the well-lived, well-organized, spiritually anchored human existence. It was not mysticism. It was not mere morality. It was something altogether more integrated and more demanding. He called it the art of living, and he identified its pillars with the precision of a master architect.
Rodan understood, with the clarity of a mind sharpened on the whetstone of Greek philosophy, that no human life achieves genuine quality without a unifying central purpose that transcends personal gratification. The Urantia revelation records his insistence that a person must recognize and yield to a superior and supernal driving life goal, something cosmic in its orientation, something that lifts the will above the horizon of mere comfort and survival. Without this, he taught, life becomes a scattering of energies, a dissipation of selfhood.
The supreme purpose must translate into a concrete, lived commitment. Rodan was no mere idealist, drifting on clouds of abstraction. He demanded that the philosophic life be structured around a well-defined goal, a direction toward which all the energies of mind, body, and spirit could be marshaled. This was not ambition in the worldly sense. It was something far nobler, a consecration of personal existence to an aim that reaches beyond the self.
Here, Rodan revealed one of the most luminous insights in all his teaching. He identified the foundations upon which the well-lived life must stand. Physical health, the body as a vehicle worthy of the spirit's habitation. Mental clarity and sanity, the mind kept honest and disciplined. Social and fraternal friendship, the cultivation of genuine human affection as the very soil in which divine brotherhood grows, and spiritual growth and God consciousness, the progressive, never-ending expansion of the soul's awareness of its relationship to the Supreme.
Among all Rodan's contributions to the apostolic dialogue, perhaps the most tender and the most penetrating was his meditation on friendship. The Urantia revelation preserves his recognition that genuine human friendship is the highest and most divine expression of creature relationship yet achieved on the evolutionary worlds. Rodan perceived, and this perception shines like a lamp in the record, that friendship is not merely pleasant companionship. It is mutual knowing and mutual acceptance. It is the willingness to be fully known in all one's weakness and limitation, and to be loved not despite that knowledge, but through it. He understood that such friendship is the human approximation of the divine love that the Father bestows upon his children. And he saw, with the penetrating vision of the true philosopher, that the person who has never achieved such friendship has not yet fully experienced what it means to be human.
The records suggest that Rodan regarded the cultivation of these deep human friendships not as a distraction from the spiritual life, but as one of its primary expressions, a living testimony to the reality of the divine family. When the philosophical discussions moved, as they inevitably did, to the nature of Jesus himself, the character of Rodan the thinker became even more vividly apparent. For here was a man who had received the gospel of the kingdom, who had been genuinely transformed by it, who had already constructed an entire philosophy of living upon its foundations, and yet who had never stood in Jesus' physical presence. He knew Jesus only through testimony and through the fruits visible in those who had walked with him. And yet, Rodan's analysis of Jesus' personality, recorded in paper 161 of the Urantia revelation, is among the most lucid and compelling in all the text. The philosopher's trained mind had been working on the problem with characteristic rigor. He came to Nathaniel and Thomas not with vague impressions, but with a structured argument. Rodan was no naive enthusiast. He acknowledged forthrightly all the evidences of Jesus' genuine human nature, his hunger and thirst, his emotions, his fatigue, his growth in wisdom. He saw in Jesus a man who was truly among men, not a divine being wearing human appearance as a disguise. This was important to Rodan. A phantom Christ could not be the teacher of the human art of living. Only a truly human Jesus could show human beings what human beings might become. But Rodan was equally insistent that something transcended ordinary humanity in Jesus. He cataloged what he had observed through testimony and through careful reasoning, self-mastery of extraordinary completeness, originality that could not be derived from any prior tradition, tireless and fearless social engagement, perfect poise, a quality of centered, unshakable equilibrium, absolute sincerity, a transparency so complete that no human artifice could explain it, and altruism without limit, a love for human beings that did not diminish with disappointment or sour under betrayal. Rodan's conclusion was bold and philosophically coherent. Jesus was a combined personality, human and divine, not one masking the other, not two natures at war within a single form, but a genuine, unified, unprecedented synthesis, a new order of being, walking in human flesh, showing by the fact of his own existence what the eternal relationship between the human and the divine could become.
What does the Urantia revelation ultimately preserve of Rodan of Alexandria? Not a saint in the traditional sense, not a martyr, not a miracle worker, not a founder of movements. It preserves something rarer and more valuable, the record of a great mind meeting a great truth, and rising to meet it with the full force of its developed capacity. Rodan received the gospel secondhand. He philosophized it forward into a coherent art of living. He traveled across the ancient world to test his conclusions against those who had walked with Jesus in the flesh. He engaged in dialogue with intellectual peers, giving and receiving in the great exchange of ideas. And he arrived, through the disciplined use of reason guided by genuine spiritual desire, at conclusions about the nature of Jesus and the nature of the good life that the revelation itself affirms as profound and largely sound.
He is, in the deepest sense, the prototype of the thinking believer, the human soul for whom faith is not the abandonment of reason, but its highest and most courageous expression. He stands in the Urantia record as a testimony to what Greek philosophy at its noblest could become when it opened itself to the transforming reality of the living gospel. And somewhere in the vast celestial archives, the record of those long Magadan conversations, Nathaniel and Thomas and the Greek philosopher from Alexandria, sitting together in the gathering dusk, reasoning together toward the light, must shine with a particular and enduring brightness.